Okay, so all of this brings us then to Weighted Astar. So this is the first variant of Astar we've seen, and we will continue to see a large amount of variants of Astar as we essentially transform the algorithm to meet our purpose for different criteria such as time or suboptimality. So essentially the goal of Weighted Astar is going to be to achieve much faster performance, right? So we're now willing to trade away some of our optimality for a boost or a expected boost in essentially search time. Now, and the beauty of all this is that, again, because we're building upon the Astar algorithm, which we've seen is optimally efficient and is extremely performant in practice, well, we're kind of going to also leverage that like baseline here, and we're just augmenting the Astar algorithm to meet the suboptimality criteria. So then, let's talk about what is the idea behind Weighted Astar. So the idea of Weighted Astar really is just that we are going to multiply the heuristic value by some amount. So now how are we going to achieve a speed up? How are we going to essentially push the speed of Astar forward? Well, I think what we often see in problems, right? Like when we're searching for these optimal solutions, we need to really obviously address both the cost so far and the cost to go. So that's our G and our H values. We see that because Astar is optimally efficient, right? It's the combination of these two ideas together that gives us this optimal, ideal search strategy. But as a human being as well, perhaps we can look at a simple problem like this. I've drawn it here. This can be potentially confusing because we would consider this a weighted grid map. What that means is that different areas of the map have different costs. So here I've drawn, you can imagine the ground is grass or something like this. I just didn't want to color it all in green. But we have a regular grid map here, and we have a river going straight down the middle with a little bridge at the bottom. So essentially, the river is very expensive to cross. It has a cost of 6, and then everything else has a cost of 1, right? It's cheap to traverse. Now, this is what we call a weighted grid map, right? Different actions, different grid cells have a different weight associated with them, a different cost. Now, that is extremely confusing terminology, but I think unfortunately in this situation it's a really, really good example for demonstrating the behavior and ideas behind Weighted Astar. But just note that yes, the weighted grid maps exist, but when we say Weighted Astar, we are going to be talking about a different weight parameter, W. So I'm going to ignore now and not call this a weighted grid map from here on out, but it's just very important to distinguish between the terminologies. Anyway, so returning to this example, we have a grid map, there's a massive river going down the middle, and there's a bridge. So regular Astar is going to spend a lot of time essentially proving and checking all of the associated costs and making sure, right, it does like this fill-in procedure to guarantee that we haven't missed any shortcut. Because of that, what you're going to see is we would essentially expand all of this area, and you would actually find that the final solution that Astar chooses is going to be some variation that goes across the bridge and up to the target T. So the optimal cost in this world was to take the easy cost bridge, right? Because crossing the water is expensive. So now this provides a good opportunity to talk about Weighted Astar because of the idea that as a human, I think in these kind of situations, you can see if I just want to find an okay path quickly, well, there's also like the other version of the path, right? You see that if you were willing to trade some of your optimality, if you didn't have time to try to check everything, there's a pretty simple path directly to the goal, right? We can jump straight to the target by crossing the river. Your trading cost for that. But in this kind of situation, you could see that Astar would have to do, or Weighted Astar would have to do substantially less work and less expansions in this example in order to find that solution. Now, I also want to note, right, that it is not necessary to have a weighted grid map to see the advantages of Weighted Astar. This is just an example, I think that's very nice and visual to show it, but this absolutely works in regular grid maps as we've been seeing the whole time. It's just a little bit like you have to draw and think about a whole host of topologies and where your walls and obstacles are, and then you can see, right, that they will expand much for your nodes. It can beeline its way much more. But getting ahead of myself. Let's return then to the idea. What is the idea that we can leverage here in order to make weighted A star faster? The baseline idea here then is that we can leverage the heuristic value, right? Even though it's greedy, even though it can be misled, it points us in the right direction. We can substantially speed up search by essentially giving more priority to our heuristic function, our distance to go. That means we're really, really, really kind of like brute forcing in what looks like promising directions. Essentially what ends up happening then is as the spoiler of the general performance, weighted A star generally outperforms A star, substantially so. We get large speed ups. And now in terms of the idea then, and writing this down, I'm saying I'm giving more priority to the heuristic function h. Well, if I define this separately, what that means is mathematically I'm going to have to multiply. We're looking for this relative bound on our solution cost. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to multiply the heuristic value by some parameter w. So the idea here is multiply our heuristic estimate by some weight w. Now again, because of course we can't improve upon the optimal solution, right? You have to define w to be greater than 1. That's the only thing that makes sense in this situation. And then the number you give it, right? It's a float, it's a decimal value. You can give it any number, 1.2, 2, 10, 10.2, anything thereafter. This value is going to essentially drive, you're saying how much you can allow A star, weighted A star, to beeline towards the goal. So this is exciting. We essentially have like this concept that we are essentially assigning our own relative importance to the two values. So if I were to say this otherwise, mathematically, this is essentially the same as saying f, I'll put a w just to distinguish it as like, this is the weighted A star f function. Fw of n is equal to g of n plus, now there is a weight value, w times h of n. Now I think what's exciting about weighted A star is this is extremely simple to understand, extremely easy to implement, but we can achieve substantial improvements, substantially faster performance just by tuning this and selecting a larger w. So you will have to kind of like explore the actual problems you're solving with ones with what we call low heuristic error, low difference between your actual heuristic estimate of how far to go and then the real cost, right? So that just means there's few walls in the way. In these kind of maps, then we would want to probably tune W to be rather small, right? Allow a little bit of slack, but hey, we're already going to go pretty well. But then in domains that are extremely difficult, well then perhaps we might want to weight the heuristic even more. So it all depends either way. And so when we're trying to select a W and choose what the value will be, well, this is going to have to unfortunately be driven by some form of like empirical measure of performance. So you're going to have your kind of domain. Each domain might have different kind of characteristics, topologies, difficulties essentially. And unfortunately some paths versus other paths in the same domain can also be extremely different beasts and have different essentially like key issues with the way that A star has to prove things. So yeah, we kind of maybe can use this idea of a heuristic error, which is like an estimate of how close was our estimate of the distance versus the true cost. Maybe this can drive your choice of W, but oftentimes, yeah, you'll kind of just try a few values, kind of binary search it to perhaps like some average performer, which is hopefully going to be related to the average heuristic error across the domain. Nonetheless, that's somewhat unimportant for this. We can also, just to achieve better performance, just give it often something like 2. Hey, it's something like 2. Just say, hey, I would love to weight the heuristic 2 times more. So what's also interesting in this whole discussion is essentially we are saying that weighted A star controls our prioritization. between G and H, right? So we, through selecting our W, we're kind of adjusting the relative importance between our two values, the cost so far and the cost to go. So that's quite exciting. I want to then write, I think what's interesting then is now that we've defined weighted A star, we see that when we have different values of W, you actually, essentially, algorithms we've already talked about kind of become, in this new terminology, a special case of weighted A star. So when W equals 0, we would see that the whole second term here, right, you're multiplying the heuristic by 0, it goes away. What we're left with then is just G of n. Okay, well, if you think about it then, what we're saying is uniform cost search, as we've seen before, UCS, is actually just a special case of weighted A star when we set the weight to 0. We're saying, hey, we want to assign no priority to the heuristic. So we've seen this before. That's kind of interesting to note. We can do the same, right? Because regular A star, as we've been discussing, is just G plus H. Well, again, that technically then we could also consider that to be kind of like a variance of weighted A star. We don't often do this in practice, but I think it's interesting to see how this very simple idea of just applying a weight is modifying our examples, and we can retrieve the behavior of a bunch of important algorithms we've already seen just through the selection process. Now I think the other one that is, anything greater than 1 is kind of entering into the idea of weighted A star, but there's also there's a last interesting result. So as W approaches infinity, as we're essentially weighting the heuristic to the maximal extent, what ends up happening is then the G value is this constant factor is completely left in the dust, right? It grows so small that it's uninfluential at all in terms of our search algorithm. And then we arrive back at essentially just F is equal to H. Well, this is what we called GBFS, greedy best first search. So I think that's quite exciting, right? We're kind of, through our W selection, we can retrieve the performance, the behaviors of algorithms we've already seen. Okay, so let's return to a global view then. So we've defined this new weighted A star. We're simply multiplying the heuristic by some W greater or equal to 1. And we can speed up search this way. But in terms of the properties now, well, so we've multiplied the heuristic value by some non-zero by some greater than 1 value. Well, that means if the heuristic was admissible and consistent before, it doesn't really matter now, right? Our performance in weighted A star is it can overestimate. So it can be both inconsistent and inadmissible in terms of the actual F value itself. So that can lead to some substantially worse case performance, or at least like in terms of the edge cases when the heuristic is poorly informed. Well, weighted A star might spend a lot more time bashing its head against the wall, trying to beeline towards the goal, realizing it can't make any progress, and then finally going the long detour. In those kind of cases, A star can have better performance. But we're gaining a lot of benefits through this. So what's actually quite exciting is that we're getting much better performance and speed, but this is actually without the cost of re-expansions. Because A star only ever expands a node once, right? Well, we've already made the trade-off, right? We're saying that the solution is only W times worse. We are happy to accept any solution that pops out. So we expand each node only once, which is still in line with standard A star performance. And so we're also getting all of this performance boost with the solution guarantee, the guarantee that our solution will not be worse than W times the optimal cost. Okay, so let's prove that, because that's obviously a very, very important statement to make, and we can't just take that for granted. So I'm going to write down then that weighted A star is providing us with a relative bounded suboptimality. That's exciting. We get to purposely choose W to determine the trade-off we want to make. So solution guarantees. Guarantee. So weighted A star will only ever give us a solution of cost C that is never worse than W times the optimal cost of the solution, C star. This is exciting. This means we can really choose and directly based on your application, hey, I'm okay with 2 times the worst solutions, just get me something faster, right? We can really parameterize and have firm control over the behaviors of our algorithms. This is substantially better than, as we just saw before, right? Like the versions that would be unbounded in terms of solution quality. It's really nice for us to have algorithms that we can control and adjust based on the problems we want to solve and the target application. Now, as well, we can prove this pretty simply. Okay, so the proof for this is going to follow pretty simply. We're going to work with essentially the f cost of the target and then of some other version of the path we could have gone. So right, we see as the driving example, we had this idea that the weighted A* path might be really short, really quick. We've expanded the target, but we know that there could have been a neighbor of t that had either an equivalent cost path or obviously a better cost path. So if I want to write that down here, then we're saying because of course the f value of weighted A*, we expanded the target first, right? Which means obviously f of t has to be less than or equal to some other neighbor of the target because we expanded the target before the neighbor, right? And the neighbor in this case would have been this node here, but it's in a generic sense, right? This follows pretty simply. Well, okay, so I'm going to try to essentially do some simple math, very simple math, to kind of rearrange and change some things and some equivalences so that we can reach this guarantee that the cost is less than or equal to w times the optimal cost. So the first thing I'm going to do then is to write, well, what is the definition of this right-hand side here? So the f value of n, we already know, is just defined equal to the g plus w times n. All right, so g of n plus w times h of n. That is by definition. Okay, well, I'm going to show that through some simple math, I can extract out the w term. So of course, this is just by basic algebra. This is of course smaller because w is greater than 1. This is smaller than if we just multiply w by both terms together, right? So if w is multiplied by both g of n and h of n, right? Well, this is going to be a larger number than here, where we just multiply just the heuristic by w. Okay, cool. And so here now with this right-hand side, w times g plus h, well, of course, g plus h is essentially our f cost estimate come back again from regular A*, right? And because of this, we know that of course, it's an underestimate, right? It's always an underestimate. Our heuristic is admissible. And because of that fact, of course, g plus h has to be either equivalent or less than the actual cost of the solution, right? So we can rewrite one more equivalent. So this line here then is also less than or equal to w times the actual optimal cost. The optimal cost of the solution C* has to be less than or equal to g plus h. That's by definition. We've already seen that from regular A*. Okay, and so this is the end of the proof, but let's connect the dots, right? So we started with saying, hey, the f value of the target, which we expanded first, well, this is less than or equal to f of n, right? And when we go look at what is f of n is g plus w times n. And then we can show through a series of just making the number slightly larger. Well, ta-da, we're left with, therefore, fw of t is less than or equal to then wc star. Well, when you get to the end of the solution, obviously the f cost of the target is then essentially g of n. Right? When you're at the target, the heuristic value is 0, so you're just left with the cost it took to reach this node g. So we're saying that, ta-da, this is c is less than or equal than w times c star. So the proof is pretty straightforward, but this obviously gives us really, really nice tight guarantees on the solutions that we can drive. And what's also really important to note, right, in this idea that the cost is only at most as bad as w times c star, well, your average suboptimality might be much smaller, right? You realistically could still be obtaining very good or very close solutions It's a worst case bounded suboptimality. So as well, remember, just like practical performance could vary as well. Maybe you're actually doing pretty well still. So this bound is not only important really for being able to control our algorithms, but then you also have to remember that even when we're trading suboptimality, the suboptimality is at most, at worst, W times, and that's also important. So weighted Astar is an exciting algorithm. It's used very, very frequently. If you're in a kind of problem where you don't particularly care about getting the exact best cost, well, weighted Astar is there for you. Now, what's really exciting, I started this whole video by kind of motivating this through the idea of, hey, like these real-time environments where time is really important. We need to make our decisions quickly. Well, what is quite interesting here is Weighted Astar is like a one-shot, right? We've fully made our assumptions. We've already given up on optimality. We only expand nodes once. We just do it by this really greedy. We've weighted the heuristic. We're going to find hopefully faster solutions, and we're okay with that trade-off. But it's a one-shot. The moment we find the target, we're done. In real applications, right, these ones where you're trying to make dynamic decisions, well, there's also this additional idea that not only do we want a solution quickly, but once you have a working solution, hey, tell your player you can start moving. Tell your drone you can start moving to dodge this thing. Well, we usually have more time, right? We still have a little bit of a time budget. If there's any time budget left, we don't want to just end with a bad path. Why can't we use that time effectively, efficiently, to continue to improve our solutions, right? So this is bringing us to the idea of anytime algorithms. And so we're going to walk towards anytime weighted Astar in the next video. Please join me there, and we will continue these ideas in a much improved and really applicable algorithm for any kind of like critical time-based domain. Thanks. See you there.